This monster enters the school at 11:32:58. These gentlemen have been at this scene, these officers, long before that, on the west side, not the south side, with a long rifle, not a handgun.
The prosecutor has tried to condense time at some points and then tried to stretch it out. But one of the things that you didn't hear in his opening was any preciseness of the times.
And Mendoza's body cam video, they have body cam videos. They both, interestingly, start at 11:35:10. Write it down. 11:35:10. At the same time, because someone from the government's investigation synced all these videos together. And I shouldn't say all of these, there's not that many, but synced all these videos together. And they both started 11:35:10. You saw what time they showed up. There's got to be body cam from when they were here talking, perceiving things.
You're going to hear that there has never been a school shooting in the United States of America that begins with somebody wrecking into a culvert like that. He climbs the fence. This is the funeral home he was talking about. People come out of this funeral home because they see this wreck, and he fires shots. Robb Elementary does not have an officer that's there all the time. So he is not the officer for Robb Elementary. He's not the police officer that's there. He is not at that school. He is actually at a park because he typically works at the high school. What's happening with this particular situation is confusing the police about what actually the intentions are of this person. They start setting up perimeters that you'll see later because they're thinking he's trying to just get away from them. Nobody's thinking, we know now, they know now, everybody knows now that he was messaging people that he's about to go shoot up a school. Everybody knows now that he was disturbed, that he was a monster, that he was trying to do this. He was speeding towards the school to do it and just happened to have not negotiated the turn and went into this culvert.
This school door is unlocked. This school door is supposed to be locked. I get passionate because that school door should have been locked. And you're going to hear evidence that if there's anything that could have changed this incident, if that school door was locked, and it should have been.
The teachers and the kids armed themselves with scissors to confront a gunman. Melody Forrest was also out there that day. She heard the shots fired. She had a concern for the kids. She was capable of action. But Adrian Gonzales does nothing more than mic his microphone and tell other officers what's going on. So why are we here? When a child is in danger and calls 911, we have the right to expect a response.
Again, totality of the circumstances of what Adrian
I'm going to object to him talking about evidence. I mean, he's supposed to be doing an opening statement outlining it. Right now, he's talking about third-party investigations. Those agencies did not have the full investigation of the Uvalde grand jury, and I think that unless he says that the evidence will show you that they're going to present about these third-party investigations, I think this isn't doing nothing but misleading the jury as to the evidence that they're going to hear in this case.
I think that's right for cross-examination, Judge.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, what the lawyers say in opening statement is not to be construed as evidence.
Fourth graders lined up throughout the morning and gathered at the cafeteria with their parents to receive certificates of achievement. It was a day of celebration. After the celebration, they returned to their homes and to their classes. They turned off the lights and they watched movies because it was a light day. Some of the kids got to go to recess. Just down the road was Hillcrest Funeral Home, and a man named Gilbert Lamons was working at the funeral home. It was about 11:30 when a truck crashed through a rail and into a ditch. So he did what any of us would do. He went to check on the driver to see if he was okay. He and Cody Brasino left the funeral home, walked across the street, got close to the ditch when they were met with a man who exited the truck and got out with a rifle, a high-powered rifle. So as you might expect, they turned and ran. Shots were fired. So they called the police. They called the police for help. The gunman jumped over the fence, deliberate pace, across the schoolyard to the southwest corner building, and opened fire. Stephanie Hale was in the playground on the south end of the school. She heard the fire, and it didn't make her incapable of action. She protected the kids. She got them to safety. They went into the classrooms. They did as they'd been trained. They hid in the dark and waited for help from the police. The teachers and the kids armed themselves with scissors to confront a gunman. Melody Forrest was also out there that day. She heard the shots fired. She had a concern for the kids. She was capable of action. She ran to where the gunfire was sounded. And there were kids at the south end. They were about to go to recess. They were told, get back in, get back in, get back in. And she doesn't leave her post until they get back in the West Wing. But she stays in there so long that when that happens and the last kid enters, she's face to face with the gunman. And he fires on her and she turns to run. And when she turns to run, she trips and she falls. And when she gets up, Adrian Gonzales, the police officer, is there. She says, he's over there. She urges him to go get him. Adrian Gonzales says, where? Over there. He's wearing black. He's in the teacher's parking lot. As shots are ringing out. This is not confusion. He gets on the radio and says, shots are fired. He's wearing black. He's in the parking lot. He knows where he is. But Adrian Gonzales remains at the south side of the school. The gunman makes his way up the west side of the west building where the fourth graders are. He fires shots into a classroom full of children at 102. Adrian Gonzales remains. He moves down to classroom 104, fires shots into the classroom of 104. Adrian Gonzales remains. He moved halfway down the wing, fires more shots, this time not into the building because there's no defect in the building. It's not going into the windows. It's not going into the bricks. It's also at the same time when forces are coming, other police officers are starting to arrive. He then hurries to the west door and enters. It's been a minute. And there's a break in the shooting, and Adrian Gonzales remains. That gunman then walks down the hallway, gets to room 111 and 112, the entryway, and fires in the neighborhood of 20 shots in the hallway. And Adrian Gonzales remains. The children in 111 and 112 are done as they're trained. In the dark, lights off, be quiet, hide, and wait for Adrian Gonzales. And the gunshots get near, and the slaughter begins. One of the shots penetrates the window going out of room 111. Melody Flores is still urging Adrian Gonzales to go in. She sees the shot come through the window. Adrian Gonzales tells the police he sees the shot go through the window. Adrian Gonzales gets on the radio and says, guys, I think he's made it in the building. This isn't confusion. Adrian Gonzales remains. For the next minute and a half, about 60 shots go into children. And Adrian Gonzales remains. 3.5 minutes into this ordeal, while Adrian Gonzales is still standing out there, his boss shows up. Pete Arredondo, along with Sergeant Coronado. They're running up adjacent to another building, get about the same distance Adrian Gonzales is from the gunshots, and they hear the shots going off. And Coronado yells, what you would expect a police officer to yell. Shots fired, get in the building. 3.5 minutes later. So Adrian Gonzales joins the other two officers and Donald Page, who's just arrived, and they go into the building. He enters the building for 80 minutes and 45 seconds after he got there and after the damage had done. So we ask ourselves, was this his first day on the job? Was he a rookie? Adrian Gonzales was a veteran of 10 years. He'd been at the Uvalde Police Department for 10 years. He'd been to the school district for a year. He had thousands of hours of training. He went to compelled training, which was active shooter training, which is pretty straightforward. When you hear gunshots, you go to the gunfire. But it wasn't just active shooter training. They didn't just sit in a classroom, they practiced. They practiced what do you do if it's in an open area, like this open area. And they trained Adrian Gonzales how to do his job safely. And that is, you look for concealment and cover. Concealment means the gunman can't see you. It may not protect you if he shoots, but he can't see you. Cover means you're protected. The corner of a building means you're protected. We're not asking Adrian Gonzales to commit suicide. He has been trained to go to the corner of a building and distract, delay, and impede the gunman while help is arriving. But Adrian Gonzales does nothing more than mic his microphone and tell other officers what's going on. So why are we here? When a child is in danger and calls 911, we have the right to expect a response.
May I proceed, Judge?
Please.
If I may have a moment to re-erase the well, I got a piece on a minute here.
All right.
The monster who hurt those children is dead. And I mean, it's emotion. I could understand why Bill, when he talked to you, I could understand why he had emotion. I can't talk to you without it either. I think you heard me say it yesterday. This is one of the worst things ever happened in our country. There's only been a few like this many, this young, innocent. It's awful. But Adrian Gonzales did the best he could with what he knew at the time. Adrian Gonzales, the prosecution got up here in the opening statement, and you're going to see, and Nico, my partner, he's going to come up here and he's going to go through the times after I talk to you. But you're going to see that the prosecutor has tried to condense time at some points and then tried to stretch it out. But one of the things that you didn't hear in his opening was any preciseness of the times. We heard about a minute. That's not what we're going to do in this trial. We're going to talk about what Adrian knew, what was happening second by second, so that you can understand that we're right. We know that Adrian never was able to confront the gunman. But the prosecution's going to agree, and the evidence is going to prove throughout the trial, Adrian never saw him. The prosecution says knowing the general location. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And one of the things that you heard the prosecution say, you heard him say that Adrian said, he's over there in the parking lot. He's over there in the teacher's parking lot on the west side of the building. What he didn't tell you is that when Adrian said that, and Nico's going to talk about it, when he said that, this is the parking lot on the west side of the building. When Adrian calls that out, he's over here, all the way on the other side of this building. And as far as being here, calling it out, the shooter had already entered the building at the time that Adrian says he's on the west side of the building in the teacher's parking lot. He does not know. Adrian does not know where he is. But I want to talk about it using this map so that you can get an idea of what happened. First, the issue was that, The issue was that,
I'm sorry. My assistant's trying to get in touch with me.
yeah, no, it's fine. Where we start, and just so that everybody can understand. And oftentimes in these kind of cases, we don't use the names of these monsters because that's a lot of times why they do this, right? It's a monster. What he did to these children, what you're going to see that he did to these children is horrifying. It's disgusting. It's terrible. But he didn't start with the kids. The first thing he did before he got to Robb Elementary was he shot his grandmother in the face at his home. So she gets shot in the face. He gets in a vehicle. Her house is probably a couple of blocks. So if you can imagine the map extending out here, he gets in a car. He doesn't know how to drive. He gets in a car with that firearm. He comes up Grove Street here, and you're going to see that this right here it's like a concrete culvert. It's got a railing here, and obviously somebody normally would make that turn. This dead ends into this culvert. After shooting his grandmother in the face, he comes down here, blows through this railing, and his car ends up in the concrete culvert. Now this is going to be important because if you listen to the prosecution, what the prosecution is wanting, I suppose, and expecting and trying to show you or argue in this trial is that everybody has to have perfect understanding of what's happening. But you're going to see that this is the first thing that contributes to confusion. You're going to hear that there has never been a school shooting in the United States of America that begins with somebody wrecking into a culvert like that. Now, what does this tell a police officer? And you'll hear what the evidence is going to show. This tells a police officer somebody has maybe shot an adult, right? Maybe committed some other crime, maybe committed a robbery, maybe trying to get away, or maybe is drunk, right? And doesn't navigate the turn, or maybe was texting. Some other thing is happening. This is not how a school shooting starts. It just happens to be next to a school. And this is important. So the shooter wrecks. And as the prosecution says, there's a fence right here. He climbs the fence. This is the funeral home he was talking about. People come out of this funeral home because they see this wreck, and he fires shots. Now, where's Adrian at this time? And just so you understand, this is Robb Elementary. These are all the buildings in Robb Elementary. Robb Elementary does not have an officer that's there all the time. So he is not the officer for Robb Elementary. He's not the police officer that's there. He is not at that school. He is actually at a park because he typically works at the high school. And he's at the park with a bunch of the students who they're having there's a different kind of celebration. As the prosecutor said, this is towards the end of the year. So students are, it's not, as we all remember in elementary and even high school, once you get to the end of May, you're not doing a whole lot except award ceremonies, talking to parents, all those other things, watching movies in the classroom, things like that. Adrian is away from here at this park, but he hears the call. He's not the officer actually assigned to even take this call. The call comes out as an accident. A car has crashed into this culvert. He's not the officer assigned. There's a different officer, you'll see, that actually comes up here later on, and the person assigned to the call doesn't ever do any of the things that you're going to see that Adrian did. But he gets a call to crash, and he says, okay, I'll go out and see what's up, see what's going on. You'll hear a particular thing about Uvalde. Uvalde has a population of people who are undocumented. You will hear that 50 times in a 2-month period is typical for there to be some sort of accident or bailout involving people who are undocumented. It's one of those things that's particular to Uvalde, particular to the region. It's one of those things that officers deal with all the time, and it's one of the things schools deal with all the time. And this is important because when that crash happens, the school does not go into lockdown. Why doesn't the school go into lockdown? Because nobody is expecting that this is a school shooting. They're expecting that this is a drunk. This is somebody getting away from something else. Now, why is that important? Even when he's advancing or leaving his car, what they can see and what they can tell at the time is not telling anybody that he is trying to get into this school to hurt any children in this school. He is trying to get away from the scene of this crash. And that's one of the themes that throughout is that what's happening with this particular situation is confusing the police about what actually the intentions are of this person. They start setting up perimeters that you'll see later because they're thinking he's trying to just get away from them. Nobody's thinking, we know now, they know now, everybody knows now that he was messaging people that he's about to go shoot up a school. Everybody knows now that he was disturbed, that he was a monster, that he was trying to do this. He was speeding towards the school to do it and just happened to have not negotiated the turn and went into this culvert. But at the moment, that's not what it looks like. That's not what it looks like to him. It's not what it looks like to anybody. It's not what it looks like to anybody, any of the officers that come up. But then there is gunfire, and that's important. So he shoots here towards the funeral home. At the same time and around, Adrian is starting his response. And Adrian also comes up Grove Street. And this is important. They'll talk to you about the fact that there was Melody Flores. As Ramos is walking this way, and he does walk. He shoots here, starts walking this way. You'll hear that people from the funeral home, the homes up here, can see that he hide behind cars. And they call that in, but that's not something communicated over the radio to the police. But they do call it in that he is here in the parking lot. By the time Adrian is getting here to the property, he starts to understand, because now the people are calling 911, as Bill talked about, and now they're saying that shots are fired. So Adrian here, as he's coming down here, He starts to hear shots are fired. This is a gate that gets onto that school property. It should be closed. It wasn't. And Adrian drives right through here. So he is responding, and you're seeing shots fired, hearing shots fired, understanding, okay, this is not just an accident anymore. And then you'll hear that Melody Flores, the teacher that the prosecution talked to you about, the teacher that the prosecutor said, well, she acted, right? And we agree. She did see kids, and she told them, we talk about the west part of the building, south part of the building, west part of the building, south part of the building. She told them, get back inside, get back inside. As she's over here telling them this, and he's here firing rounds, and you're going to know that that's where he's around this area firing rounds. Adrian is coming here. Once Ramos is behind these cars in the parking lot, Adrian doesn't see him at all. Never does. The prosecutors never ever saw, not in his life, ever saw this gunman. Gunman's here. Flores is here. Adrian sees Flores from that distance and thinks that she may be the gunman, or that she may have, or somebody. He doesn't know if it's a man or a woman. You'll see the distances. It's too far to tell. But he thinks that he's hearing that there's a person. He knows there's shots fired. He believes that this person is either grappling with a gunman or is the gunman themselves. The reason he thinks that they might have grappled is because, as Bill said, she trips and she falls in, and this is all dirt. So there's like this cloud of dust, and it looks like from that distance. What does Adrian do? He acts. You will watch him, and there's a camera from this funeral home that will show this. He comes in and he spots her. He zeroes in on her, doesn't know it's a her, doesn't know it's a coach, doesn't know it's a teacher, thinks that that's what he's there to respond to, thinks that that's potentially the danger that he's there for. And he drives straight to her. He goes straight at her until he gets here. And this is where Adrian ends up parking his car. And you'll see that. Adrian parks here. She falls down here in the dirt. Remember, this is the south side of the building. 5 seconds after he gets out of the car and realizes this isn't a gunman and there's nobody else here but her. And he's trying to ask what's happening. 5 seconds after that, the shooter starts shooting into the side of this school. And he does. You can see by the shell casings, they'll line here, and you'll hear that shell casings, when a gun is fired, will go back, slightly back into the right, slightly back to the right. And you could use the shell casings. There's never any over here, so he wasn't over here firing at Melody Flores. They're here, and they go right up the building here. So it gets in here. So what they're talking about is the gunman is moving up this school. And these distances, when you go and you see it in person, or you see it in some of these videos, you see the pictures, it doesn't do it justice. There's nobody that can see or understand here what's going on over here. There's not. She is telling him, but she's going to testify to you that when he got out, she told him he's in the building. And she was 100% wrong. He was standing right here, shooting here. And that's okay that she's wrong. We're not requiring her to be right. This is the most tragic day of Melody Flores' life. It's the most stressful thing that she's ever been through. But as the prosecutor says, Adrian says, well, but she's telling me that he's over there and that he's wearing black. And what did Bill say? He said, well, what did he do? He didn't do nothing but call the radio for other people to come. That's what police officers are supposed to do. Whenever you hear information, you have to call it out to everybody else for everybody else's safety. So you'll hear that at that time now, 3 officers arrive right here. One of them has a rifle. They see him about to go in the building. One of them asks for permission to shoot. Permission, there's not even a chance for a response. Because by the time that they turn around, he's gotten inside. Adrian doesn't know any of this. Didn't see any of this. They see it because they're in a direct line of sight to that door, to that west entrance. Adrian is dealing with a woman who is going to tell you and going to testify to you that she's telling Adrian that he's in the building. But it's clear that these gunshots, as he's moving up this building, it's clear that those gunshots are coming from outside. What Mr. Turner said was that he was supposed to make it to the corner of this building here. That's what he's talking about. Make it to the corner and distract delay. The distance from this point to this corner, there's nothing in between. And you'll hear that Adrian is doing as he's supposed to do. Once these gunshots happen, once he starts shooting into this side of the building, Adrian thinks they're taking fire. He does. He gets to the front of his car and he's trying to use the car as cover. There's a car. He has his car. This corner of the building is about 45 seconds away walking from where his car is. Maybe 30, 32, 33, 34, 35, depending on how fast you walk or run. But you have to run through open. But his car is right there, so he doesn't do nothing. He gets behind his car to try to figure out where the gunfire is coming from. You're going to hear that these officers here, as the shooter is shooting into the building all the way up, these officers here, they think that the gunfire is coming at them. Because of the nature of gunfire, and we're going to talk about it. Once you have a rifle fire, it's going to bounce, and it bounces off of these structures, and it echoes, and it comes back to the people, and it causes confusion. So they think that the shots are coming at them. The shots aren't, but it's understandable they think so. He thinks they're coming at him. She's going to tell you that she's telling him that he's in the building when he knows that he's not in the building. But when he calls out that he's on the west side, you'll know when he understands and knows. When Adrian finally figures out where he is, their indictment says, knowing the general location of the shooter. He does call out on the radio the general location of the shooter. 1 second after the shooter's already entered the building. When Adrian is saying that he's by the cars in this lot, he's not there. He's inside. These guys saw him go in. These guys here saw what happened. Adrian is here and cannot see that. Now, other things begin to happen. So at a certain time, and even you're going to hear these guys, they still don't know what his intent is. They think that they're setting up here. They're trying to figure out. They know he's wrecked and he shot at these people. They're assuming that he's trying to get away from them. Nobody still is assuming this is what ultimately happens, is tragedy. Once something like this happens, right? This was the only and the first time ever that a school shooting starts with a wrecking culprit. Now, it's part of the training. Don't get confused. Don't get confused by the fact that there may be other things going on. Just like if there was a robbery at this funeral home and somebody's running out of the funeral home, it's not the first assumption back then for a police officer to say, oh, he's robbing the funeral home, then he's going to run over here and he's going to go into the classrooms and shoot the children. It's not the first assumption. Now, of course, that doesn't excuse it. It's wrong. It contributes to the confusion. So as we get here, you'll see that, I think Bill said, his boss arrives. What happens is that some of the officers, as he's going in this way, some of the officers bring the car around to try to figure out, is he trying to get around here? You'll see that Coronado and you'll see that Chief Arredondo come this way and this way to where Adrian is. By the time that they talk to Adrian, you have Sergeant Page that pulled in and arrived. So what's happening is that Adrian's trying to call it out. He sees other people. He then hears and understands eventually when Sergeant Page gets there, as he's trying to brief him about what's happening, he hears that he's in the building. And Adrian is one of the first 3 people to go in. This is not a man that does nothing. This is not a man that is sitting and doing nothing. It's a man who is confused. It's a man who's talking, who has made assumptions that are understandable that turned out to be wrong. But he was trying. He was going towards that danger. And this is a man who, when it was time and they are standing here and it's time, because you'll hear that Coronado did say, he's in the building, we got to go. But Sergeant Page never said any of that. Sergeant Page said, we're standing there. We hear the gunshots from inside the building. We made the decision. Everybody's kind of making that decision at the same time. The first 3 people to go in, when Adrian goes in, when he goes into the building, Sergeant Page is in front of him and he goes in behind him in the building. The gunman comes out of the classroom and takes shots at other officers coming in from the other side. Adrian Gonzales did not fail to act. The gunman turns that way instead of that way. He's right in the line of fire. And he was willing to be there in a hallway with a rifle with no real protection from a rifle. They had nothing that would protect them from a rifle. That wasn't going to stop the rifle. If he turned around and shot him right in the chest, right past the Kevlar, that bullet kills him. And he did. He went in. He's one of the first in the building. But they get backed off because the shooter does not come out of the classroom. But you'll see him in the videos. Does not come out. But the gun comes out, shoots at other officers that are trying to come from the other way. They back off. You're also going to hear that Adrian has a radio. None of the officers' radios in Uvalde ISD, none of them, you'll hear what they say, break. That just means none of them work. They cannot communicate inside the building. His chief tells him to go out of the building and call SWAT. Adrian does. You'll also hear that as people start arriving, right? Because eventually there'll be 374 officers that arrive. They, in any of the indictment they read, they are not charging Adrian with the conduct of any officer in that hallway. Anybody that was standing there, anybody that was like getting hand sanitizer or anything that you might have seen. He is not being charged with any of that conduct. He is not being charged, in fact, with any other conduct of his. The only thing where they stop is they stop after the shooter enters 111 and 112 and shoots at her in the direction of the children. That's where it stops. So what the state tried to make you believe was this insane amount of time that he had to do all of these things from the time that he's here, from the time he first contacts Melody Flores to the time the shooter goes in the building on the side is about 1 minute. That's what we're talking about. It's about 1 minute. So he's trying to get this information, understand it, communicate it, figure it out, and it's about one, and also protect himself and the teacher. I mean, he's trying to make sure that both of them are not being shot at because they don't know. That's 1 minute of time. This isn't a man waiting around. This isn't a man failing to act. They're not going to prove that. But what they are going to do, I'll tell you, they'll talk about it too. What they are going to do is they're going to show you the worst things that you've ever seen. You will not come out of this trial the same person in your heart. I'm not. They're not. They're not. They're not. It's traumatic. They're not. Nobody will ever be the same. And we're not comparing what we've seen, but you can't imagine the pain. And what the prosecution wants you to do is see that, see those horrible things. You get so mad at Adrian that you convict. So mad at Adrian that you say, you convict him because of this horrible thing that's happened. And I can't even describe it, what they're going to do. They're going to try to play on your emotions. They're going to try to do that. The monster who did this to these kids, the monster who hurt these children is dead. He is dead. He doesn't get this justice. Hopefully he's got it different. But he doesn't have this justice. There's not going to be this trial for him because he was shot and killed as he should have been by police officers on the scene. So now you're looking for somebody to put in that chair, put you in those chairs. But showing me those pictures, like you're going to, I want you to be prepared for it. And I want you to know that it's going to hurt you. But I want for you to know that it hurts us too. Thinking about anything these kids went through, it's terrible. I told y'all yesterday, I got a 4-year-old, 1-year-old. It's the hardest thing to go on. But what the judge will tell you is that the law and the evidence are the only things that can guide you. The only things you can use to come to your verdict. And I'd ask Mr. LaHood to address you.
I mean, Jason laid it out for you. I'm going to go over some specifics. We're going to talk about those photos in a second. I think Jason appropriately talked about them, and he's right. I mean, there's an animal involved in this situation, a monster, and he's no longer here, and that monster can't sit in that chair. And so what we have to do is we have to deal with what the government is doing and trying to have you focus on, because the monster's not here. And so the phrase that you're going to hear throughout this trial that law enforcement talk about a lot is called totality of the circumstances. And I'm going to ask you to keep that in your mind. We're going to ask you as we go over some of the specifics that Jason talked to you about, because this is dynamic. There wasn't a call initially for school shooting. You're going to hear something called a 1050. It's an accident. As Jason said, there was an accident. There was an accident and Adrian was doing his duty at the high school. You're going to learn that the school, and you're going to hear about a lot of the school. And I'm not here to protect the school. I really don't care, because the school has a lot of blame. And you're going to hear other agencies gave the school a lot of blame. And one of the things that they should be blamed for is they didn't have a full-time officer. Adrian's full-time at the high school. Adrian said, well, there's an accident. I'm going to help. It's a small community. The agencies help each other. DPS, Uvalde PD, Independent School District. I mean, they all help each other and they share radio transmission. And by the way, we're going to ask you to focus on the radio transmission. It's very important what was transmitted and what officers knew or didn't know during this very fluid and dynamic situation. So this is just we're going to go over this briefly, okay? So this is what we're talking about. Not the scale, obviously. School. You're going to hear about So you're going to hear it at 11:28. At some point, we don't know for sure, but maybe around 11:20, this monster shoots his own grandma. And so this monster gets in a car and he thinks he's running away from a murder of his grandma. And so he's coming down and you will hear that he tells people online, I'm going to shoot up the school. There's times in there, and that's why we don't know exactly when he shoots his grandma, because he did that before and after, not to law enforcement, not to 911, to online people. But 11:28:23, he wrecks in that culvert. He doesn't manipulate the corner properly and crashes. You're going to hear Gilbert Limones, as Bill said, call 911. You're going to hear the 911 video from Gilbert, and it's going to be emotional because Gilbert's walking out there. You can hear it saying there's an accident. He's walking out there. Oh God, they're shooting. He's shooting at me. Because as they were going to the culvert to help, this monster is shooting up at them from the culvert. He runs back. He lets the dispatch know he's walking to the school. He's walking to the school, and you will hear Gilbert, and I assume he's going to testify and say, in the name of Jesus, Lord, please protect those children. Oh God, please protect those children. Please hurry. Yes, sir. We're on their way. But what I want you to focus on is, how was that dispatched? Incident involving a gun, not shooting at a school. Again, bailouts. Jason talked to you about what you're going to hear about bailouts and how many they have. This community deals with those type of bailouts. And so he deals with that. Between 11:30 roughly, 05, and 11:31:34, he's going to walk very deliberately, as Bill said, towards the school. At some point, he starts shooting at the school from the parking lot. You will also hear not just Gilbert, the funeral owner, say that she saw him hiding between cars. It's important. So at some point, Adrian realizes it, because it's very unclear on the dispatch. You'll hear him yourself, that there's a gun involved. Not towards children. There's just a gun involved walking towards the school. So Adrian knows in his mind instantaneously that this is not just a crash. It's not a 1050, something with the school. And so he's driving, and at 11:31:41, here's Melody, and she's to Bill's point, she's yelling at kids to stay in the building. Okay. So she's out here. You're going to see Adrian drive all the way into the complex and drive back here. It's important. This is the east side of the building. This is going to be considered the west side, and you will see the south side, and this is the west side, excuse me. He makes contact with Melody. Now, there's some other times that are important. This is at 11:31:55, roughly. Okay, times are going to matter on this because they're trying to hold Adrian accountable for what he did or didn't do and what he knew and didn't know, and that's important. So at 11:31:55, he's parked and he gets out of his vehicle and makes contact with Melody. Now, at 11:32:09, it's not on here, but 11:32:09, he dispatches and he says, shots fired, shots fired. So now he's taking cover. What's important though, it's here, is that 11:32:23, Officer Mendoza shows up at the corner on the west side of the building. Pay attention to these times. He's already shooting. He's shooting at the side of the building. He shows up. He says shots fired. No one is going to testify that Adrian could see anything. And you'll see some pictures. Look, he's way over here in his car. You'll see the picture. And then the shooter, that monster, is walking up, taking shots. That he has no line of sight. Line of sight is important in this trial. 11:32:29, Officer Saucedo shows up on the west side of the building. Remember where Adrian's at? He's with Melody on the south side, but way where you can see the east side. 11:32, Sergeant Coronado shows up. Remember when Bill said his boss? His boss showed up a lot sooner than while running over here. There at this point, you will hear that Officer Mendoza believed he was under fire. Now, this is important because you're going to hear about echoes and vibrations and when people are shooting near buildings and how it sounds. Melody thinks she's being shot at. All I can tell you is, do we believe that she's being sincere? We do. She has no reason to lie about that. What you're going to find interesting, I think, we think it's interesting, but is that she comes in to talk to law enforcement 7 days later. They don't go to her. She's not interviewed the next day. 7 days after this incident, she comes in and says, I have something to say. She's listened to the media. She's watched all reports and she comes in. And I'm going to say this respectfully because we're not going to try to beat her up. We're just going to talk to her. She's wrong about almost everything. She describes Adrian as Officer Page. Completely describes him differently. She says that the shooter, that monster, didn't have a rifle. For sure, he had a handgun. She thought that he shot at her. And all we can say, and the government will have to admit to this, but there's no evidence going to show that there is any, that you're going to hear something called defects. It's kind of damage from any type of gunfire. There's no evidence, objective evidence, that there was any shooting this way. No shells or rounds over here. No holes through the buildings. These are just metal buildings. So an AR-15 would have gone straight through that. No evidence of that. So she's wrong about a lot of things. And then she's also wrong and she tells the ranger of what door and how this animal got into the building. She's wrong about all that. Okay. And we think it's very sincere, by the way, but this is 7 days later. So these gentlemen are here. These officers are here. Mendoza, Saucedo, and Coronado. At these times. Now, these times are important. Okay. These times are very important. We talked about 3209. Adrian radios shots fired. So Ramos is walking up this side of the building and he gets into the school. And that's important because we're going to talk about it and you're going to hear about agencies evaluating, different agencies, and I'll tell you about who they are in a second, evaluating this incident. And every one of them wonders why this school door is unlocked. This school door is unlocked. This school door is supposed to be locked. I get passionate because that school door should have been locked. And you're going to hear evidence that if there's anything that could have changed this incident, if that school door was locked, and it should have been. So he gets into the school at some point. This monster enters the school at 11:32:58. These gentlemen have been at this scene, these officers, long before that, on the west side, not the south side, with a long rifle, not a handgun, with cover because their car's there in a formation. So you're going to hear Saucedo shows up at the time he does, literally seconds after Mendoza. Mendoza thinks he's taking fire, but there's no evidence that Ramos shot that way. Zero evidence. They're not even going to try to assess that. Claim that. But still, Mendoza thinks, and he talks about, he describes it. He's getting behind the car. He's trying to get behind the engine block. Saucedo drives up and blocks him so he can cover his cover officer, which I understand that if it was really happening. Saucedo gets out with a rifle. Coronado shows up. Sarge, can I shoot? No response, turns back, and they acknowledge he went into the building. There's an acknowledgement from these officers that he went into the building, but they didn't go to the building. And we're not trying to say blame them also. I'm just saying this is fluid. They think because of all these bailouts. Can I just tell you, we think the evidence is going to show, we know it's going to show, because the officers were thinking this. This is not Adrian, this is them right now. Mendoza, Saucedo, and Coronado. They couldn't even wrap their head around the fact that this potential could be a school shooting. They thought that this person with a gun was trying to get away from officers and was going to cross through the school to go out the east side of the building. That's what they thought. That's what you're going to hear them say. Let me tell you what's super important, because Bill told you, the government told you that Adrian is assessing the situation. You're going to hear about that. You're going to hear about observing, orienting yourself to the situation, deciding, then acting. It's called OODA loop. Okay. You're going to hear about evidence like that. This is objective evidence, not anybody's opinion, because you're going to hear it yourself. At 11:32:59, 1 second after this monster got into the building, Adrian calls out, he should be on the west side, supposed to be wearing black. Why? Because Melody's with him, telling him information, and he's collecting data. He's heard shots. He doesn't know where that's coming from. Everybody thinks they're being shot at, including Melody, including these officers. And he does what his training tells him to do. Relay information. He's relaying information. He's not seeing anything. Nothing's been done in his presence. When they read out the indictment, nothing was done in his presence. He relays it. These times are critical. And we're going to humbly ask you to stay focused on these times. He's reporting as he's receiving information. Note what's going on where he believes he should be, near the teacher parking lot. He's already in the building. And then 22 seconds later, he is shooting into those classrooms. And then seconds later, he's in the classroom. Opportunity and ability. This is what it's going to play out to. I know when you speak in generalities, it's easy to make an accusation until you have to peel the onion back, until you have to come into specifics. And we've asked you guys, we asked you for your permission in jury selection if we could ask tough questions. And it's always tough to ask tough questions about a tough case and sensitive situations. That's why we ask you those specific questions. But we're going to do it because we have to. But this is what the evidence is going to show. And the government's going to have to stand up when this is all over and after you've heard all the evidence. And they're going to have to say, we want you to hold the man responsible that as he walks into this fluid situation, drives into this fluid, goes to the danger, drives into the storm because he thinks that he's going to this person, this suspect with a gun. He doesn't stick back and create a perimeter with all respect to these officers. He goes in. He thinks and then he realizes it's the coach. At the time, he didn't know that. And you'll see the funeral video, like Jason said. And they're going to have to say that when he radios, because that's when he knows, Melody's with him. She's not going to know what times. A second after, he's already in the building. How can he delay, distract, or deter someone when he doesn't see him? He's completely on the opposite side of a building. And by the time he finds out the situation, observes and orients, and then communicates, he's already in the building. And seconds later, this animal is stealing children from Uvalde community. So what the government will say and do is they'll want you to focus on Coronado's video. Remember Coronado, the one that was here initially and was asked to shoot, and then and we'll talk to you about, and then goes to this side, and you'll see him running up from the other side. You'll see his body cam video running up this way. One thing that we want you to focus on though is his body cam video and Mendoza's body cam video. They have body cam videos. They both interestingly start at 11:35:10. Write it down. 11:35:10. At the same time, because someone from the government's investigation synced all these videos together. I shouldn't say all of these, there's not that many, but synced all these videos together. And they both started 11:35:10. You saw what time they showed up. There's got to be body cam from when they were here talking, perceiving things. They both, and that's what you're going to see. And so as Coronado is running at 11:35:10, he's already come all the way around and he meets Chief Arredondo, and then they start running up. And then they finally run into Mel because she leaves Adrian's point and goes to the school. She leaves and Adrian stays there in cover, and he had communicated information. And you're going to hear that a Lieutenant Vargas shows up, and then eventually a Sergeant Page shows up, who Melody describes as Adrian, and she was mistaken about that. And then as Coronado and Arredondo are walking up and running up, there's shots fired. Now you will see, and we anticipate that the government will focus on this. On Coronado's body cam, it's moving, that you see Adrian and Page standing there. Now they're not standing there eating something, or they're standing there talking. Adrian had cover. Page drives up. There's a realization that he didn't take any fire. So they get out. Sergeant Page gets out, and it's really a moment. You're walking, they're like this, you're going to see them walking towards the school. Then they hear shots fired. We can hear Sergeant Coronado say, "Get in the school." And he said, "Oh shit, get in the school." And he's yelling and he's out of breath. But there's no evidence that neither one of them heard him. They were so far from him. God bless you. They didn't hear him. And they immediately run into school. They're one of the first ones, if not the first ones, Page and Adrian, into school. And then there's some officers on the other side. And as I said, they take fire. That's what this is going to boil down to. But we anticipate they're going to want you to focus on that literally that moment, that second that you see Adrian and Sergeant Page standing there and then walking towards the school, and then they sprint into the school and you see Adrian's gun drawn and he's in the hallway. It goes in again. We also think they're going to focus on time to enter because Bill talked about that in opening. This 3 minutes and whatever seconds. There's a lot going on in these 3 minutes. We're going to focus and break it down. It's not about just saying there's 3 minutes, because their indictment doesn't cover all 3 minutes. Their indictment covers what they decided to prosecute on is when he made it all the way, that animal made it into the building and then started shooting into the school. Remember? At 11:33:22. That's what it specifically covers, because that's when the assaults begin. Not the 3 minutes and whatever seconds after, as many officers are on the scene at that time and surrounding the school. But we'll talk about that. We'll cross-examine on that, and you'll hear evidence about that. And then they're going to focus on Melody Flores. And I kind of gave you a heads up about Melody Flores. She's just wrong about a lot of things. And it's stressful. As Jason said, and I'm not saying this to scare you we talked about this in jury selection. None of us, you will not leave this trial the same. You just won't. And thank you for taking on this role, but it's we're going to talk about the photos in a second. But Melody's wrong about a lot of things. Her times, she's with Adrian, not sure how long. So Adrian's dealing with her at the time, and she's with him. There's shots being fired. She sees bullets or glass breaking. Officers are coming, they're around. You're going to hear radio dispatch. Again, that's going to be really important about what's being communicated to the officers by the dispatcher and then by other officers. This is not in the comfort of a courtroom as one of the Rangers during their investigation you would hear say, with 20/20 hindsight and playing Monday morning quarterback. That's from a Texas Ranger, not from us. Okay? Because you're going to hear about interviews. And so they're going to really want you to focus on these photos. And I wish they wouldn't. Not because it hurts us, because that's what they want those photos to do. It's because it hurts those precious people over there. I shared with you in board what my family's been through, and so I get it. And so we're going to ask you, it's a really, well, if you have to get emotional, you get emotional. You may. I anticipate you will, depending on what you see. This is emotional. This is an emotional trial. People are going to get emotional. Bill's a good man. He got emotional. But we're going to ask you not to make a decision off emotion. Because that's not that doesn't bring justice to anybody. But I do want you to focus on this. There were multiple agency investigations. Multiple. The DOJ did an investigation. Looked at all the evidence the government's going to show you. There's not some secret evidence, with all due respect to them, that they're going to show you that the DOJ didn't see. Texas House of Representatives did an investigation. They had a committee. They didn't. There's not new evidence that's going to be presented to you that they didn't see. This report has a lot of criticism to go around to the school. Really has to do with that door and other things, by the way. Radios that can't work inside. Officer not assigned to the school. Lockdown procedures that weren't followed. A lot of things. Way to communicate. Individual locks. The actual classroom, 111, wasn't locked. 111 wasn't locked. You'll hear some evidence of could it even be locked? And did they know about it? And what should have happened? You're also going to hear evidence of the Uvalde police policy from 2015, whether it's ever been replaced about how officers are supposed to respond. Should they wait for backup cover? Should they communicate? Should they observe? And training is going to matter in this case. And so we're going to ask you to stay focused. You're going to hear a lot of training, but again, totality of the circumstances of what
Your Honor,
Adrian
I'm going to
experienced.
object to him talking about evidence. I mean, he's supposed to be doing an opening statement outlining it. Right now, he's talking about third-party investigations. Those agencies did not have the full investigation of the Uvalde grand jury, and I think that unless he says that the evidence will show you that they're going to present about these third-party investigations, I think this isn't doing nothing but misleading the jury as to the evidence that they're going to hear in this case.
I think that's right for cross-examination, Judge.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, what the lawyers say in opening statement is not to be construed as evidence. They're summarizing what they believe the evidence will show. If the evidence doesn't show that, you can recall that.
Thank you, Judge.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Department of Homeland Security reviewed evidence. City of Uvalde hired Mr. Prado, reviewed evidence. And what you'll see, Adrian fully cooperated every time. He wasn't in a corner hiding. He didn't hold information. He cooperated. He talked. He talked to investigators. He talked to the Rangers. He talked to whoever wanted to talk to him because he wanted to help. We're going to ask you to focus on what the evidence will show Adrian did. He took the call. He took the call to go to a school that he wasn't assigned to. He drove to the suspect into the storm, thinking that it was the person that had this gun walking towards the school. He gathered information the way his training told him to do. That's what you're going to see. He's supposed to gather information so he can let other officers know what's going on. He went into a building. After relaying that information, one of the first to go in, as we talked about. He called SWAT because he was asked to call SWAT because those radios couldn't work in the building. Like Jason said, break. I can't break. Meaning I can't dispatch, I can't communicate. So he goes outside to do that. Many officers are on the scene at that time. He stood perimeter because they didn't know if you're watching the east side, he's on the south side, there's a west side, other officers are inside by this time. And so he stood perimeter at the school. He tried to find out if class was even in session. He didn't even know if class was in session. They needed to find out. You're going to hear that the officers are there kids in the school? They didn't even know. There wasn't certainty that even kids were in the school. Remember, he's coming from a high school, they call it Mexican Park, right? That's the way they call it in Uvalde. And where many of the high schoolers were there. So are these kids even in the school? It's not his school. This is not where he patrols on a regular basis. And you're going to hear evidence he evacuated children. You're going to see it on Coronado's. They're breaking windows and they're getting kids out as now they're waiting for, you're going to hear Vortec. These are people that have rated shields that can take a high powered rifle because they were under resourced. That community was under resourced. They didn't have a shield, a rated shield for high powered. You're going to hear that there's shields for handguns and then there's shields for high powered rifles. And they were waiting for that. So he's evacuating children from other classrooms on the other side. And he's checking on Ruiz. You're going to hear about an officer, Ruben Ruiz, who he communicated with. Was tragic part of this. He's talking to his wife, and she's been injured. She passed. And Ruiz wanted to go inside. And I love my wife. I mean, who wouldn't want to just go in there, you know? And they took his gun away from Officer Ruiz. And Adrian kept going back and check on him twice. He's doing all these things at the same time. He's got the building plans because they were asking for it, because people didn't understand the layout of this building. He got that for them. And he ultimately secured the master key because they needed the master key. And then you're going to hear some tactics about how you breach an outward swinging door versus an inward swinging door and what is needed and whether they had the equipment to do that. But the evidence will show they didn't. This is what Adrian did. I mean, the government wants to make it seem like he just sat there, you know. He didn't just sit there. He did what he could with what he knew at the time. And this was fluid and it was a dynamic situation. And we're going to ask you, and I don't know how you do it. And we all have to do it a different way, is to stay focused on this because this is going to be emotional. And because we want justice, right? We talked about that. We talked about that our system works off of you and Lady Justice with a blindfold. And that's what we're going to ask you to do. Because evil is not rectified with injustice. Pure evil visited that precious community. It did. But it's not rectified with injustice. And so at the end of this trial, we're going to come back to you and humbly ask you to consider the law and the facts and properly apply them. And we're going to be requesting and asking for a verdict of not guilty. Thank you for your attention.
Is anybody booking the rules?
Yes, sir.
You know who your witnesses are. The rule has been invoked, so please instruct them and don't let them come into the courtroom while the testimony is going on.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I see some of you are taking notes, which is great. I'll instruct you at this time. If that assists you in concentrating on the evidence, please do it. But I will tell you, when you go back to deliberate, the bailiff's going to hold your notes, because if there's a conflict as to evidence, we rely on the official court record. But if it helps you in concentrating, please continue to do it. Can I see a lawyers up here real quick on an unrelated matter? Good morning, sir. Would you raise your right hand for me, please? You solemnly swear the evidence in the testimony given in this cause will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Have a seat.